In the bitter winter winds of Central Asia, a man named Inalchuk, once the proud governor of Otrar in southern Kazakhstan, stared into the vessel that would deliver his death. It was a small crucible filled with molten silver, hissing and spitting in the cold air. His captors told him what was about to happen. He would be bound, his head forced back toward the heavens, and the molten metal poured into his eyes and ears. "You loved wealth and life," they jeered. "Now it will fill your mind in death." For Inalchuk, this gruesome punishment was the final act of defiance turned tragedy. Months earlier, he had dared to challenge an emerging power from the Mongolian steppe, an empire led by a man the world would soon know as Genghis Khan. His choice and his city's fate would set the tone for one of the most devastating military campaigns in medieval history. A ruthless world shapes a ruthless man. The Conqueror, later called Genghis Khan, was born around 1162 as Temujin, son of a tribal chief named Yesugei and his primary wife Holun. Legend says the infant entered the world gripping a clot of blood, a sign he was destined to be a warrior. The Mongolian steppe was a harsh proving ground where survival demanded strength, cunning, and sometimes betrayal. When Temujin was about 10, his father was poisoned by the rival Tatars. Suddenly, the boy and his half-brother Bektar became rivals for leadership. Though Bektar was older, he was the son of a secondary wife, while Temujin's mother held higher status. The politics of succession were treacherous. To secure his future, Temujin ambushed and killed Bektar with the help of his younger brother Khazar. Brutal by modern standards, such acts were often the price of power on the steppe. Temujin's early years were defined by shifting alliances and betrayals. One of the most influential relationships of his youth was with Jamuka, a boyhood friend who became his sworn blood brother. But as they grew, their visions for Mongolia diverged. Jamuka wanted to preserve the old system of loosely allied clans ruled by aristocratic warlords. Temujin dreamed of uniting the tribes under a single merit-based leadership, his own. The two eventually clashed at Dalan Balju in 1187. Temujin was crushed. Jamuka captured about 70 of his men and had them boiled alive. Yet Temujin's defeat was temporary. 17 years later, he returned stronger, defeating Jamuka and his allies at Mount Naku. This time, Jamuka was captured. Temujin granted his former friend a so-called noble death. Accounts say his spine was broken without bloodshed. It was a calculated gesture, mercy enough to show legitimacy, but decisive enough to eliminate a rival. The rise of Genghis Khan. Temujin's vision of unity steadily gained followers. His personal story mixed ruthlessness with pragmatism. When his wife Burta was abducted by the rival Merkit tribe soon after their marriage, Temujin waged war to rescue her. Burta's first son, Joki, was born soon after, and rumors swirled that the boy might not be Temujin's child. Yet Temujin raised Joti as his own, likely a political move to avoid creating another enemy. The Merkits themselves were less fortunate. They were nearly wiped out, an early example of the genocidal tactics Temujin would use again. By 1206, Temujin had triumphed over rival clans and was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler. He had transformed a fragmented steppe into a single war machine. His armies were disciplined, fast, and terrifyingly effective. His rule combined meritocracy, rewarding loyalty and skill regardless of birth, with a willingness to use overwhelming violence to secure obedience. A trade dispute turns into a bloodbath. The Khwarazmian Empire, stretching from modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Persia, seemed powerful and sophisticated compared to the nomadic Mongols. By the early 13th century, it had fought off Seljuk Turks, challenged the Abbasid Caliphate, and dominated Persian trade. But Genghis Khan was looking westward, eager to open new markets and secure the Silk Road. In 1218, the Khan sent a trade caravan of about 450 merchants to Otrar, near the empire's northeastern border. Governor Inalchuk suspected the mission was a cover for spying. He seized the goods and had the merchants executed. Instead of striking immediately, Genghis Khan tried diplomacy. He sent envoys to the Khwarazmian ruler Shah Muhammad II, demanding justice and reparations. The Shah responded with contempt. He killed one Mongol envoy, mutilated the others by shaving their beards, and sent them back humiliated. This was a fatal mistake. Genghis Khan viewed harm to envoys as an unforgivable insult. He prepared his armies for war, the siege and fall of Otrar. In autumn 1219, the Mongol war machine descended on Otrar. The siege dragged on for months, but the defenders' loyalty cracked. A commander named Karacha betrayed the city, allowing the Mongols to breach its outer defenses. Inalchuk and his most loyal men barricaded themselves in the citadel and fought savagely, tearing bricks from the walls to hurl at attackers. Resistance was hopeless. The Mongols overwhelmed the fortress. Inalchuk was captured and subjected to the infamous molten silver execution. Whether for symbolism, revenge for the dead merchants, or sheer terror, the message was unmistakable. Otrar's population suffered mass slaughter, setting the tone for what would follow across the Khwarazmian lands. Cities burned, Bukhara, Samarkand, and beyond. With Otrar destroyed, Genghis Khan split his forces. He personally led troops toward Bukhara, one of the medieval Islamic world's intellectual centers, famed for its libraries and scholars. The Mongols breached the city walls, using captured civilians as human shields to absorb enemy fire. Once inside, they looted and burned. At Bukhara's Friday Mosque, Genghis reportedly told the survivors, "If you had not committed such great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Samarkand fell soon after. Despite deploying war elephants, the defenders could not hold out. The city surrendered after a brief siege. Initially offered mercy, the population was then massacred, a classic Mongol tactic to inspire fear in future foes. Further south, the trading hub of Balkh in Afghanistan, a melting pot of Persian, Turkish, Jewish, and Indian culture, was obliterated by 100,000 Mongol horsemen. Balkh would eventually recover, but only after centuries of ruin. Terror and strategy. Intertwined, Genghis Khan was not mindlessly destructive. He could be pragmatic when it served him, sparing artisans, engineers, and scholars to repopulate and enrich his empire. Yet his campaigns were also deliberately terrifying. Cities that surrendered were sometimes annihilated anyway to send a warning. Resistance or submission, the Mongol will was absolute. In 1221, Merv, then perhaps the largest city on Earth with a population nearing 500,000, opened its gates hoping to avoid bloodshed. It was a fatal gamble. Genghis's son Tolui massacred the inhabitants and even broke the dam that sustained the oasis, turning the city into a desert ruin. Nishapur tried the opposite approach, fight to the death. Tolui's forces bombarded the city with siege weapons and stormed its streets. After victory, they killed nearly everyone, men, women, and children, reportedly stacking severed heads into 3 grim pyramids. Skilled craftsmen alone were spared. By the end of the Khwarazmian campaign, perhaps 1.25 million people, a quarter of the empire's population, had perished. Once great cities were erased or left empty for generations. The Mongols had perfected a blueprint: psychological warfare, advanced mobility, and uncompromising retribution. The later conquests and Genghis's death. The destruction of Khwarazm opened the gates of the Islamic world and Eastern Europe to Mongol expansion. Over the next decade, Genghis and his generals repeated the same formula in northern China's western Xia kingdom, in the Jin dynasty's lands, and eventually deep into Russia and Eastern Europe. Yet the man himself was mortal. During a campaign against Western Xia in 1226 to 1227, Genghis fell from his horse and suffered injuries or illness. Sources disagree whether it was an accident, disease, or something more exotic. Some medieval chroniclers spun wild tales. Marco Polo suggested he was shot by an arrow. Others claimed lightning or assassination by a vengeful princess. More likely, he succumbed to complications from his fall and infection. Before his death in August 1227, the Khan ordered his burial site kept secret. Legend says his funeral cortege killed anyone who saw it pass. Once his body was interred somewhere in Mongolia, 1,000 horsemen trampled the ground flat to hide every trace. To this day, the tomb of Genghis Khan has never been found. Legacy of a Conqueror. To his followers, Genghis Khan was a visionary who united warring tribes and created an empire that stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian. He established systems of merit-based leadership, religious tolerance, and even a written script for his people. To his enemies, he was an apocalyptic force whose armies erased entire civilizations. The Khwarazmian campaign showcases both sides: brilliant strategy and horrific slaughter. Diplomacy rejected became total war. Betrayal met theatrical vengeance. His sons and generals carried his methods across Eurasia long after his death, reshaping continents and trade routes. The Mongol Empire would become the largest contiguous land empire in history, but its foundation was laid in blood, especially in places like Otrar, Bukhara, and Merv. Centuries later, Genghis Khan remains a paradox. National hero in Mongolia, cultural villain elsewhere, and one of history's most consequential figures. His story, born in hardship, fueled by ambition, defined by conquest, still echoes across the steppes where he rose and the ruins he left behind. And that's the incredible and terrifying story of how Genghis Khan shattered the Khwarazmian Empire and reshaped the world. If you found this story fascinating and want to dive deeper into history's most powerful empires and forgotten battles, hit that like and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring the past to understand our world today.